So now we have a couple of tools that we can keep in our minds for when we're trying to design something. So that brings us to this concept of design that we want to talk about as we work our way through all of our activities. And the design process is just a way for us to attempt to solve problems. So when issues in our world, I call it problem finding, right? So I carry a little notebook with me everywhere I go. So when I come up with an issue, a thing that bothers me, something that just doesn't seem like it fits right, I write a little note to myself in my little notebook. So I know that I found an issue, there is some problem behind that issue, and I can use this design process to try to come up with a way to solve that problem, okay? So the issues that we're going to be looking at today, thinking through this design process, is that we often wash our hands for too short of a time to get them really clean. And it's really important that we have clean hands, especially now because we have this pandemic that is happening. So we need clean hands so that we aren't spreading disease around to other people, okay? So that's an issue that we can think of and start to work through. How can I come up with a way to design a solution? But first, I really want to create that, phrase it as a problem. So what is the problem here? So the problem is, how can we create a simple tool? This is going to be really our challenge for the day. How can we create a simple tool that we can use to remind people of proper hand washing time? So we want to establish an amount of time that we would use that would be good to make sure that our hands are completely washed and they're not going to be spreading any kind of disease, okay? So keep that in your minds as we work through everything that we're going to work through today. Now, the way that we're going to attempt to solve this problem is that we're going to be writing computer code to create a solution to this problem. So we're going to be using the microbit, which looks like this, but you don't have this yet, but we have the platform that we can write software to put on this, which is called MakeCode. So we can still write the software that we would put on this little micro controller, okay? So we have MakeCode, which is the platform that we're going to be using to do this.
So if you go to makecode.microbit.org or makecode.org and click the microbit, you should get to a home screen that'll look a little different probably for you, because I have a bunch of different projects already on here. You guys might just have a bunch of blanks here. When we get to this screen, our new project is what we want to start. So if I click new project, it'll prompt me to name it. And I'm going to name mine Casey number 1, just because. If we have a particular convention, we'll share that later. I'm just going to create it. And what happens is I come to a blank screen right here that has 3 main parts. I want to talk about the main parts before we get into details. Over here on the right, this little workspace area is where we're going to construct our codes, our code blocks. And we'll be picking from these drawers or these categories in the middle. And the ones that I pointed out come from the first 3 drawers here, basic, input, and music. And then we'll probably pull one out of this loops as well. Finally, the third piece is this simulator over here, which is going to show us what the microbit would actually do if we had the microbit to download to. We can do 99% of the stuff without even having the microbit. So we'll see the results of our code right over here on the screen. All right. So I want to start with the most basic. It's called basic, conveniently enough. If I click on it, what happens is all of the blocks that are in that drawer become visible. And I'll start with one of these things that says show icon. So I'm just scrolling down until I find something that I want. I see that it highlights. If I click on it, it places that block in the work area, but it's grayed out. It's grayed out because it's not connected with an input. Right now, it's disabled. I need to have something to tell it when to show this heart icon. And whenever you open up MakeCode, you get these two blocks here when you open it. They're automatically there. They are the shape of these inputs, and it's important to keep track of both shape and color when you're looking at the blocks. The input blocks sort of look like big mouths, and the output blocks sort of fit in those mouths. And when I drag it over there, just like in Scratch, I can drag them together and they click in. Once it loads, it comes over here and automatically shows that heart over there on the simulator. So it's going to do it one time. It's going to start. It's going to show the heart. I want to add a different block to show you how we can make something that looks like an animation. So what I'm going to do is go back to the basic and look at show LEDs. And what this does, I'll click it in there. What this does is it gives me individual control over all of the LEDs that are on the face of the microbit. So if I put mine up here to the screen, you can see that there are 25 LEDs, 5 across, 5 down, for a total of 25. And you can individually control all of them. By putting in that block and not having anything on, what that did is turn them all off. So I went from the heart to the off. I can click on anyone that I want and add some lights. But when I'm here in the on start block, well, once it reloads, it should show me, and it'll stay like that. In real life, what we use the on start block is just for something that happens when you first turn on or plug in the microbit, right? If I want to get more interesting, I can drag this series of blocks over into the forever. And what that's going to do once it loads is just toggle back and forth. It's going to scroll through those things. So I can have a little animation. But that's going to be happening forever, just like it says. So on start happens only once, forever happens always. Those ones aren't really the best for, for normal programming. So luckily there's some other ways to get inputs. I'm going to pull my little code blocks out, and I'm going to go over here to the input. And let's see, before I do, I'm going to clean up these things because I just wanted to show you what you're always going to see. They're okay just sitting by themselves up there. They're not going to hurt anything. But if you want to clean up your screen, you can either grab it and drag over to the left, it becomes a trash can, or I can right click, and then one of the options down here is delete block. So if you want to get rid of stuff, drag it to the left, or right click and delete. I'm going to replace those two inputs, on start and forever, with an input here that's on the top of my list called on button A press. So if I click on that, I notice it's a different color, but it still has that same shape. And it's a shape that looks like it fits really well with these blocks. So I pull them over. And what happens in the simulator, it gets colorful when the code is loaded. I can see it's ready now, but it's waiting for me to push button A. One of the things that people often get confused about when using the simulator is the button isn't this little blue triangle in this case, whatever color the microbit happens to be on your screen that says A. That's pointing to the button, which is the black circle right up on top. And you'll be able to see when you get your microbit, it's clearly a button. If I press button A, then it just runs through that program one time, ending at the smile. Okay, so I could press it again, and it would run through that program one more time. But the way I've got it written, it's only going to do it once and only when I press button A. Got one more thing to show you, but first I want to point out that on these buttons, if I click on the drop-down menu that it says A, you can see that there's choices for button B, which is on the other side, or you get a choice for pressing both of them at the same time, A plus B. So you have 3 choices with just buttons. Okay, let's say, last thing I want to show you. Let's say I want to make this repeat a couple of times, or 2 or 3 times. Way down here on the green loops, if I click on that, the first block looks like another input, but it also, it also has these little tabs on the top and bottom. I'm going to put that inside my button A up on the top, and then I can drag on the top blue block and everything below it will insert right inside. So it makes it really easy to move blocks around. Say I don't want it to be 4 times, I only want it to be 2 times. I can change that number. And again, wait for that to get colorful. It means the program is ready to run. If I press A, heart, smiley face, 2 times. I lied. I said it was going to be the last thing. There's one more thing that I'm supposed to show you. Back under basics, let's say if I push this and I want to change the timing of that little animation that I made. Easiest way to do that is to go under basics. And way down here near the bottom is a pause button. I'm going to click that and put it in between. And you see how great it just separates so that you can put the blocks in there. And I'm going to change that 100, which is 100 milliseconds, which is actually just a 1/10 of a second, to 2 seconds. So I get a big change. Again, it turns colorful now when everything's ready to go. So the only thing I've changed is this pause block. Let's see the effect of that. Press A, heart stays on longer. The face is just a short thing. Okay? So those are some basic ways that you can control the LEDs and make a little picture gallery on there. And so we're going to give you guys a couple of minutes to try and do that on your own if you haven't been doing it already. But we want to challenge you to have at least a couple icons, maybe more if you've already been doing it, and have some number of repeats so that you can make sure that you've got this piece down.
The next thing that we're going to talk about, so keeping in mind that our overall goal today is we are trying to use MakeCode as a way to design a hand washing timer. Remember that we had the issue that we frequently don't wash our hands for a long enough period of time, okay? So with using what Casey showed us, one of the things that you could create there, as someone pointed out in the chat, is a simple animation. And you could make that simple animation take a certain amount of time, and maybe we could loop that a couple of times or several times, depending on how simplified your animation is. But one thing that we might want to be thinking about is if we're focusing on the hand washing part, right? If I've got my hands under the sink, I'm putting soap on, I'm running the water, I'm doing all of these things with my hands, I'm trying to then at some point dry this. My focus might not be on looking at my microbit to watch that animation as it continues through. So in the design process, that would be like, maybe we just went through our first iteration of a design, create this animation that goes over and over again. But now as we've used it, one thing that we want to always be doing is anything that we're trying to design, we want to be using it as we're designing it so that we can come back to it over and over again for multiple iterations, so that we can refine it, so that we can add new features, so that we can add multiple things to it that will account for different circumstances that we might find ourselves using the thing in. All right, so as I said, I'm washing my hands. I've got my hands under the sink. My hands are wet. I'm trying to apply soap. My focus is elsewhere. So what I might want to do is I might want to add some kind of noise to my microbit, so that even if my attention is focused on the soap dispenser or focused on turning the faucets on and off, I might have something that is going to alert me that my time is up, that I have washed for a sufficient amount of time. Noise is one way that we could do that. Okay, so let's talk about some of the sound controls that you have within the microbit and the make code. All right, if you have a microbit, when you get a microbit, there is not a little built-in speaker, but it's really easy to plug up a set of headphones or a little small speaker that you can use this to make noise with. Okay, so let's walk through how we can do that. I'm going to use the exact same input that Casey was using in his demonstration. So if I go into this input, I'm going to use the same one that he used, which was the on button A pressed. Okay, so now I have my input, or my mouth, as Casey put it, and I can fit other things into that mouth. If you look here in the middle of the make code platform, one of the choices that I have is music. And within music, you've got lots of different options. And if you're a musical person, you'll find yourself here playing a lot, right? So the way that I'm going to do this, we're going to keep this really, really simple. Now, when we go to the challenge portion of this, you can feel free to make it much more complicated than the way that I am going to do this. But for me, I'm going to keep things really, really simple. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to play tones, okay? So the first tone that I'm going to play is a middle C. So now I've got on button A pressed, we should have a middle C tone. So if I come over and I press my A in the emulator, and I pressed it 3 times, I have a middle C tone playing, okay? The other thing that we can do with these tones is, if you're a musical person, you are familiar with the concept of rest. So we're playing middle C for 1 full beat, and we're going to rest for 1 full beat. So now if I press the A, the exact same thing should happen as before, because this second block is telling the microbit, just take a rest for a second. Take 1 beat where you're just resting. So the exact same thing happens. Thing that you can do here is you can right-click on your block and you can duplicate a block. Just like Casey showed you earlier, where you can delete, one of those options is to duplicate a block. So now if you go in, I can duplicate that block and put it below my rest, and then I can choose the tone that I want this to play. If I just click on that middle C, it'll give me this little drop down of a keyboard. So now I'm going to choose the middle D. So now if I press my A, I should get a different result. Oh, got to wait for it to gather up its steam here. There we go. Oh, and then I moved it and it stopped again. There we go. So now it plays my middle C for 1 beat. It takes a rest for 1 beat, and then it plays a middle D for 1 beat. Okay, so that is one of the ways that you can create musical tones and sounds with the microbit. But if you click back in under music, you will see that there are other options that you can do in here as well. For example, you can play a full melody. This one is called da-da-da-dum. So you can just put that in there, press the button, and you will see that they have these preset kind of melodies that you could be able to play. So the challenge, let me stop my share for just a quick second. And if Adam can go back to the slideshow, your challenge now is going to be using a different input. So we've used the A button press input. Let's choose a different input. And then let's figure out how to create a melody. And it doesn't have to be a good tune or anything, just a melody where you put a couple of notes together to create a series of tones, or you could use one of the melodies. And if your brain works a little bit like my brain, then you're going to be thinking that you're kind of putting pieces together here, in that there's probably going to be another step that comes along here, right? Where you're going to start thinking about the amount of time that things are going to take, okay? So that's if you're kind of casting out a little bit into where we're going to be going next, that's what we would have.
Thing is, if we go back to this idea of hand washing, the challenge that we're trying to figure out is how we can possibly wash our hands or get people to do hand washing for the right amount of time, right? They've said that 20 seconds is about the right amount of time. So from an engineering point, it'd be really good for us to think about, why is it hard for us to wash for 20 seconds? We probably want to get back to our phones, back to our computers, onto something else, right? It's not that exciting of an activity, but it'd be good to get to sort of understand, and you could maybe talk about this with your family, like, why is it that we want to stop washing our hands so quickly? And perhaps the device you come up with helps people because it takes their mind off of it. So maybe it's a tune they can hum. Maybe it's a timer that tells them long enough. So there's a couple different options there. And if you talk to people and think about why it is that they are challenged with that, then that can help you overcome the problem that we're having here. And so what we want you to do for next week, and we're absolutely not going to call this homework because we're not going to do that, but the task that we're putting out there as a challenge for you to do for next week is to use the blocks that we showed as a starting point, but to create a timer that would that you could use if you had the device in front of you to keep track for 20 seconds, and then use a sound and a graphic to let you know that you've reached that 20 seconds, or that you've satisfied whatever it is that the device needs, something like that. But some combination of the timer, the visual graphic, and the sound is what we're looking for. And that's what we're hoping you'll share the code from with us in the Flipgrid for next week.